Welcome everybody. It's 7:30, so we thought we would go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. My name is Dan Murphy. I'm the General Manager of the Broadway Rose Theater Company. I am also the President of the Board of Directors of the Tiger Chamber of Commerce. Today's debate has been brought to you by the Washington County Chambers of Commerce Partnership, a consortium made up of 8 chambers of commerce in Washington County. The Chamber Partnership is hosting this debate to help educate business owners and leaders on candidate positions in regards to critical business and economic issues. Now, we appreciate the willingness of our candidates, especially this early in the morning, to participate, Suzanne Bonamici and Rob Cornilles. We also have various representatives from our 8 Washington County cities and metro present, and they're actually right here in the front row. So thank you all again for being here this morning. We have an hour this morning, and that is our intent, to ask as many questions as time allows. In that spirit, I would request that you refrain from applause during the debate to provide as much time as possible to hear from our candidates. So a couple of housekeeping rules. If you have a cell phone, a pager, a beeper, this would be a great time. If it's not implanted, please shut it off. Okay? And then also, normally in theaters you don't bring coffee, so if you are to spill it, would you please tilt it towards yourself and then walk out. Okay, so let's get started. Here is a brief overview of our process. We have flipped a coin backstage, and the first to address you will be Suzanne Bonamici. Each candidate will be provided a 5-minute opening statement. Then we have 4 WCCCP questions in which both candidates will have 3 minutes to respond, with 1-minute rebuttal for the first respondent. This will be followed by 4 audience-submitted questions, which I have there, and with no rebuttal, and each one will have 1 minute to respond to these questions. Now, at the end of the debate, each candidate will have a 2-minute closing, okay? And that will be, Ms. Bonamici will go first, and then Mr. Cornilles will make the first, I messed it up, he'll make the first closing statement, and then Ms. Bonamici will go after. As timekeeper, we'll signal the candidates with how much time they have remaining in their allotted time. I will politely, but effectively, end the candidates' comments that exceed the time limits. Our audience today is made up of business leaders and residents from the 1st Congressional District, and including economics seniors from Tiger High School, which is wonderful. And we ask our candidates to answer questions specifically and to relate their responses to questions to the 1st Congressional District. So now let's meet our candidates. So I'm going to read a bio of each one of them from that we were able to take off the website. I could have had you guys wait in the dressing room. So, Rob Cornilles. 17 years ago, Rob and his wife Allison started a Tualatin-based business called Game Face Incorporated, which advises professional sports franchises on how to better serve their fans and customers. Rob turned his idea into one of the most influential consulting and executive training firms in the sports industry worldwide. Despite the fact that the majority of his clients are east of the Mississippi, Rob turned Game Face into a huge success, employing over 60 Oregonians in the process and bringing industry executives to Portland to enjoy the Oregon experience. Rob is running for Congress because he wants to ensure that other small business owners and entrepreneurs will be able to build successful companies here in Oregon. Beyond his success in business, Rob is committed to building stronger and healthier communities here in Oregon. He serves on the board of directors of the Special Olympics of Oregon, the Oregon League of Minority Voters, and the Japan-America Society of Oregon, Umpqua Bank Regional Division, and the Virginia Garcia Memorial Foundation. The Virginia Garcia Memorial Foundation assists in funding the Virginia Garcia Community Health Centers in Washington and Yamhill counties, which are dedicated to providing medical services to uninsured and low-income residents. A graduate of BYU, Rob is a proud and active father in the lives of his 3 sons, ages 21, 18, and 15. He and Allison, his wife of 25 years, met in Newburgh, where they were high school sweethearts at Newburgh High School. Suzanne Bonamici. Suzanne holds a BA in journalism and a law degree from U of O. After graduating, she worked as a consumer protection attorney for the Federal Trade Commission in Washington, D.C. At the FTC, she worked in a division that works to protect consumers from predatory or discriminatory lending practices. She moved to Oregon in 1986 with her husband Michael, where she entered private law practice specializing in representing small businesses. After 6 years of practicing law, Suzanne took a career break to raise her children. During that time, she volunteered for the Classroom Law Project, Beaverton Education Foundation, and several theaters. Her school advocacy work is what first took her to the Oregon State Capitol. Suzanne started as a legislative assistant in the Oregon House of Representatives in 2001, followed by her first campaign in 2006, where she was elected to serve the House District 34 of Washington County. After only one term in the Oregon House, she was appointed and then elected to the Oregon Senate in 2008, and was re-elected for a second term in 2010. In the Oregon legislature, she was the chair of the Consumer and Small Business Protection Committee and a member of the Education Workforce Development Committee. She is recognized as a leading voice for the mortgage reform, introducing legislation that ensures homeowners facing foreclosures receive timely information about how to request a loan modification and provides them recourse if there is a violation. And she and her husband of 26 years have grown children that went through the Beaverton School District. So, now we're going to go ahead and our first candidate, which will give us the opening statement. Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the chambers, and especially for the high school students who are here today. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk with you and giving you the opportunity to learn more about the candidates and where we stand. Now, it's no wonder that so many people in Oregon today and across the country are frustrated with Congress. With so many people out of work and the economy fragile, too many members of Congress have the wrong priorities. Now, I'm running for Congress because I share that frustration, and I have priorities that will help rebuild the economy and also rebuild confidence in Congress and government. And to understand why, I want to tell you some more about myself so that you know what my values are and where they come from. Now, years ago, my grandparents crossed the ocean, came through Ellis Island looking for the American dream, where if you worked hard and played by the rules, you could survive and thrive and raise a family. My grandfather was a coal miner and then an auto factory worker. My dad worked at the local bank, helping businesses get capital that they needed. And my mother, in addition to raising 3 children and teaching piano, ran a small business. In fact, my first job was there, started back when I was in high school. I worked my way through Lane Community College, University of Oregon, and University of Oregon Law School. And how about those Ducks? And I worked my way through by working at Legal Aid, helping low-income families who were struggling. And I learned that many people were struggling not by choice, but because they had health care bills they couldn't pay or because they'd lost a job. I got interested in consumer protection. And after law school, went to Washington, D.C. and worked at the Federal Trade Commission, working on federal laws like truth in lending. And also took on some mortgage brokers who were defrauding people out of their homes. I met my husband, Michael, in Washington, D.C., and more than 25 years ago, we moved from Washington, D.C. to Washington County to raise our family. We wanted the quality of life that Oregon offers. I joined a small law firm in Portland where I stayed for a couple of years, and I specialized in representing small business owners, typically people who had invested their life savings in a franchise and then found out that what they got wasn't what they were promised. And then I took a career break to raise 2 children. Our kids went through the Beaverton School District, and I did a lot of volunteer work in our schools. Everything from rebuilding the playground to serving on the Beaverton Education Foundation, and teaching kids about government and civics. And then in 2007, I started in the Oregon legislature, where I served 1 term in the House and 2 terms in the Senate. I continued my work improving public education, and then I became a leader on consumer protection issues. And importantly, I worked with our State Economic Development Department to help businesses get access to capital. And I want to thank Representative Margaret Doherty for helping with that bill. And in Congress, my top priority will be to rebuild the economy right now and in the long term. I'll continue the work that I started in the legislature, helping entrepreneurs and small businesses access the capital they need. And let's get people back to work on infrastructure projects. We have just structurally deficient bridges in this country. Let's get people back to work on those projects, rebuilding our infrastructure to help business and our electrical grid to help our renewable energy industry. And as a graduate of community college, I know that we can work with our community colleges and make sure that job training is supporting our local economy. Now, another priority is to tackle the debt and deficit, but we need to do that the right way by investing in things like education and job training instead of continuing tax breaks for millionaires, and making sure that we protect, not privatize, Social Security and Medicare, rather than continuing to give money to big corporations like oil companies that are making record profits. Now, my third priority, because we were asked about our top 3 priorities, will be an effective, attentive representative for this district. I'll focus on constituent services and accessibility, and I'll represent all of my constituents, regardless of party affiliation. Once this election is over, I represent everyone, whether they voted for me or not. That's the way I'll continue my representation. And you can trust who I am, because I've had the same values and priorities throughout my career. Earlier I mentioned my grandfather who crossed the ocean. He came from Italy, and my other grandfather was a minister. Sometimes I think he sits on my shoulder, and I know he'd be proud not only that I'm running for Congress, that I've been recognized for my integrity. It's something we desperately need in Congress. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to the debate.
Great, thank you. Okay, Mr. Cornilles, it's your opportunity for an opening statement.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you again to the Chambers for hosting, and the theater is well done, beautiful facility. And I also want to congratulate the students who got up this early to join us. Hopefully your teachers won't know later in the day that you had got up so early. My name is Rob Cornilles. I'm actually a native of the 1st Congressional District. I was born in Portland, and I was raised about 1.5 miles from this theater here in Tigard. This is where I spent my formative years. As was mentioned in the bio, I moved to Newburgh when I was in high school, and that's where I met my wife Allison. And as was mentioned, we have been married 25 years with 3 terrific sons, all of whom have gone through the Tigard 12th School District. And about 16 years ago, we started a business not far from here, a company called GameFace. It's given us a wonderful opportunity to learn from the ground up what it takes to grow jobs. And we've had the opportunity to employ 60 people and their families in that period, and also create a national reputation for the work that we've done in our particular field. It's been very, very rewarding. But I got to tell you, it's also been very discouraging as a native Oregonian to see how our state has changed in some cases for the worse. When I was growing up here, I really modeled, or wanted to model, the efforts of some of our great leaders in those days. I think of Tom McCall, I think of Mark Hatfield, I think of Vic Atiyeh. Now, these were Republican leaders of our state when I was growing up, when I was developing my own thoughts and ideas. And I'll never be in the class of those gentlemen, but I'm running for office now because I think more of us need to emulate their qualities of independence, their qualities of cooperation, of innovation, of thinking outside of the box, and certainly of being able to grow our economy, because we certainly need that here in Oregon today. My priorities in order to accomplish that involve the following. We need to simplify and, frankly, modify our tax code considerably. It needs to become simpler, it needs to become more fair and more predictable. Not just for consumers, not just for taxpayers, but also for small businesses who we must rely on right now to grow the economy and to create jobs. 60% of the jobs in this state are developed by small businesses. And as a small business owner, I can tell you we feel hit on every side because we cannot understand this complex tax code. You know, the only people who seem to be able to take advantage of it are the mega corporations and the mega rich, and I think it's wrong. The second thing that we have to do to grow jobs in this economy, especially in the 1st District, is recognize what our strengths are. We produce outstanding products and services here that I believe the world would want if they only had access to them. And if we only had representation that was bold and strong, that would champion these products and services around the world. And I want to be that advocate. In fact, professionally, I started my career working for the Los Angeles Clippers, of all things, promoting that team. And if I can promote the LA Clippers, I can't wait to see what I can do with Northwest Oregon. And the third thing we have to do is, back in Congress, we need to see fiscal responsibility. Because fiscal responsibility will actually encourage and give confidence to consumers and those who would hire to move this economy forward. Now, I have to take a moment here in my 5 minutes, something that I really don't want to do, but needs to be done. And that is, most of you, if you watch television, have seen for the last month and a half that there's been a barrage of negative ads against me. $1.5 million has been spent by the other side to try to discredit me. These ads have been put together by the same people who covered up for David Wu. I want to stay focused on the issues of this race, but this is deplorable, ladies and gentlemen. And unfortunately, my opponent supported and campaigned for and contributed to David Wu. And she is part of the insider establishment that allowed us to vote last time without the knowledge of what we know today. This is very uncomfortable for some of us. It's certainly uncomfortable for me to talk about. But the fact is that she and her husband, who by the way was David Wu's personal attorney for many years, have enabled him, as well as others. And he assaulted women. And because of that enabling, we now have the worst representation of any district in the country. And that is, we have none. No representation. Now, one of the members of her party, the vice chairman of the Democratic Party, said they need to bear responsibility. And I think that's true. They fooled us then, and now they're trying to fool you today about my record, about my background, about my experience creating jobs and serving in this community. And I'm not going to let it happen again. I don't have the resources that they do, but through the course of this conversation today, I look forward to sharing with you why my ideas, my advocacy for you, will be the fresh start this district so badly needs because we've been neglected for far too long. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for our debate. The questions that will be asked today were prepared by a panel of chamber members from throughout Washington County. The candidates were not given these questions in advance. So question 1. What should Congress be doing to reduce the regulatory burden on business that is dragging down our economy? Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you. Congress should be starting by talking to business owners about where those regulatory burdens are and listening to what the needs are. Now, I have a background as an attorney, which sometimes I'm criticized for, but I want everyone to know that, especially the students, if you've taken the civics class, that the Congress is the legislative branch of government. And here's where I want to say that details matter. Sometimes I'm accused of spending too much time reading the fine print, but it's oftentimes the fine print that has the unintended consequences. So what we need to do is keep up a continual conversation with businesses. Where are the regulatory burdens? Let's make sure that when we're passing regulations that impact big banks, for example, the Wall Street banks that caused the financial crisis, we need to make sure that those regulations are not negatively impacting small businesses and our community banks and our credit unions, for example. Now, I served in the Oregon legislature and heard from constituents for several years about the problems that they were having, especially with foreclosure and trying to get their loans modified. I didn't get complaints from constituents who were working with credit unions or community banks. So we need to make sure that we're crafting legislation in a way that doesn't have those unintended consequences. And I invite all of you, especially here today where we're in a chamber event with a lot of business owners, to let me know which are the regulations that are impeding business. You know, last year Forbes found that Oregon was number 6 in the country for business. Let's figure out what we're doing right and promote those areas. Let's address the problems and the barriers and make sure that we're doing that in a way that rebuilds consumer confidence by having the right regulation, but that doesn't impede business growth and creativity and innovation. So I welcome your input, both now during the campaign and after, as the next representative in Congress, to keep in contact with me about where you see the barriers, and I'll help you make sure that we aren't over-regulating your businesses.
Great, thank you. Mr. Cornilles.
Well, I don't think the problem in Congress today is that we don't have enough lawyers. I think the problem in Congress today is that we don't have enough people who actually have practical experience reaching into their pocket, their own pocket, mind you, and creating a job. This is what my wife and I did 16 plus years ago. We started a business out of our savings account and out of a spare bedroom in our home in Tualatin. So if you want to know what creates jobs, you probably want more people in Congress who've done it before and done it on their own dime, not yours. I think that's the kind of discipline, that's the kind of skill set we don't have enough in Congress. It's certainly how Congress began back in the early days of our country. It wasn't formed by just a bunch of attorneys. It was formed by normal people. People, farmers, business people. Yes, some attorneys. It had a balance, and we're out of balance now, ladies and gentlemen. And so if jobs is the #1 issue of this election, which I think you all agree that is the #1 issue, then wouldn't it stand to reason that we should probably elect someone who's actually created a job out of their own back pocket and also knows the regulatory burden that inhibits further job growth? When my wife and I started our business, it was about a year into it, we decided, you know, we want to expand. Why? Because we were seeing a great demand for our services. So what's the first thing you do to expand? You hire. It's a natural extension. And I can look at the trajectory of our business and I can see when we began to hire a lot and when we began to decrease our hiring. And a lot of it was due to the regulatory burden that we were facing, whether it be state or whether it be federal. Dodd-Frank is an example. It's a bill that was passed more than a year ago, a year and a half ago, and because of Dodd-Frank, we are seeing this contraction of capital to small businesses, which then prevents them from risking or investing and hiring. So if you want to see more hiring, you need to release the regulatory burden that's on American businesses right now. So many of them are sitting on their hands because they either can't deal with what they've got or they don't know what's coming around the corner, because we have an indecisive Congress. A Congress that continues to put band-aid approaches on tax policy, on regulatory policy, because they don't have that practical experience. It's time that we return just normal people back to Congress. And I would also add, in this particular economy, being excruciatingly cautious, as the Oregonian described Suzanne recently, I don't think that's what we need in Oregon. We need boldness. We need the audacity of hope, to borrow a common phrase. We need someone who will actually drive this economy forward, be a strong voice and advocate, not only domestically, but internationally. We can't have someone sitting on their hands because that's what business is doing today. And that's why jobs have been curtailed, and that's why futures of our young people who are sitting in the audience are in doubt. I aim to change that.
Thank you. Rebuttal, Ms. Bonamici.
Yes, first I want to take just a moment to say I'm a little bit surprised that I'm being accused of not only not being normal, but of someone who's making negative attacks when my opponent started this morning with a negative attack. And I want to say there's one place where I do agree with Rob, and that's when he said that the best thing about David Wu's resignation is now we don't have to talk about him anymore. So I want to just emphasize that I have a broad background both in the private and public sectors. And caution is something that is important when you're taking a position on a bill that's going to impact jobs in the district. So I'm not afraid of the criticism, but I want you to understand that legislating is something that requires not only the ability to understand the consequences of legislation, but making sure that any legislation impacts positively the district that one is representing. I will be a champion for this district in a way that helps rebuild consumer confidence and that helps build our economy.
Great, thank you. Question number 2. Despite the recent Health Care Act, the cost of health care continues to drag the American economy down and hurt our businesses' ability to compete. What more can Congress do to reduce health care costs for all businesses and citizens?
I believe I go first. Let's start with the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act was passed almost 2 years ago by Congress. Some people refer to it as Obamacare. I would have voted against the Affordable Care Act had I been in Congress back then, because I don't think it addressed the #1 issue facing healthcare today, and that is, as the question reflects, it's the cost of healthcare. It addressed access, but if you don't address cost, you can't continue to provide greater access for people. I'll use this very simple analogy. It's simple to me. If all of us want to come to the Rose Theater for a play, but the tickets are $100 a piece, don't you ever let that happen, by the way, Dan? If that were to happen, most of us would say, I can't go to that play, it's too expensive. But if Dan, out of the goodness of his heart, would lower the cost of a ticket to $10, more people would have access to the theater. So if you want to provide greater access, naturally, lower the cost. The Affordable Care Act didn't do this. Now, it passed nevertheless. And I have been criticized by members of my own party this past year because I've said, had I been in Congress this past year, 2011, I would not have voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Why? Because I thought it was just theatrical exercise, pardon the pun, Dan, by the Republican Party. Because the Senate, which is controlled by the Democrats, never would have passed the repeal, and certainly President Obama never would have signed it. So instead of getting busy on lowering costs, the Republicans just went through a partisan exercise. I think they ought to be ashamed for it. What I would have done is I would have put the power of my influence, working with the majority party, which I will be a part of if you elect me, which allows me to have a greater say in matters that pertain to this district. And I would have said we need to lower costs several ways. First of all, in no particular order, we need to create greater portability so you can take your health insurance from business to business, employment to employment, even through state lines. You need to be able to shop for insurance across state lines, just like you do for car insurance. By creating that kind of opportunity, you create more competition in the marketplace. Competition lowers costs. You also need to allow small businesses like mine, perhaps like yours, to pool our resources together and to have the buying power of greater numbers, such as Intel is able to do, or Nike. Just because they have more employees doesn't mean they should have lower premiums. You also need to make sure that we don't have doctors and nurses practicing defensive medicine. And they're doing this because of the fear of litigation, because we've become an overly litigious society. I'm not going to make a joke there about lawyers. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have tort reform, then I believe you allow doctors to do what they do best without the fear of lawsuits.
Thank you, Mr. Cornilles. Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you. Yes, we need to lower the cost of health care. Absolutely. They're increasing too fast, and the way we do that is to have more people covered. If we don't have universal coverage, then what happens? The people who don't have coverage end up getting their health care in the most expensive place possible, the emergency room. Now, I did a ride-along with the Washington County Sheriff, spent a day riding around to learn about what they do and what a typical day is like. We went to the emergency room at St. Vincent twice in one day. We need to make sure that everyone has coverage, because then they can get the preventive care that they need. That helps to drive down costs. I believe that the Affordable Care Act had some good provisions in it, like the prohibition against denial on pre-existing conditions. You know, when my dad went to work for the local bank, he stayed there until he retired. That doesn't happen now. Young people today often want to change employers. They want to leave and start their own business, change careers. The prohibition against denial on pre-existing conditions is going to help. I think it's been stifling people that they couldn't leave a job because they'd lose their insurance and couldn't get reinsured if they had a pre-existing condition. So it does a lot there. Now, at the state level, Oregon is making some changes that can show leadership in this area. With the healthcare transformation bill that passed in the last session, that's going to focus more on community care organizations and making sure that people get the preventive care they need, and also the creation of an insurance exchange that talks exactly about what Rob was saying, making sure that individuals and small businesses can pool and get better rates through this exchange. It's being created as we speak. Now, I'm proud to say that the Nurses Association have endorsed my candidacy because I recognize that we also need to be in a system where those who are qualified can practice at the top of their scope. We have gone a long way in Oregon in making sure that people like nurses and nurse practitioners can provide care as well. So we need to do everything we can, including negotiating on prescription drug costs. Now, that's something at the federal level that we do for veterans, but you know what? We don't do it for seniors. In Medicare, if it's good enough for veterans, we should be doing this for seniors as well. Now, in Oregon, we have a prescription drug purchasing pool where you get the volume discounts with that bulk purchasing. We need to be doing that across the board at the federal level as well. That is something that I have indicated support for, but my opponent has not. And let's do everything we can to lower costs and to have universal coverage that will help to drive down the costs. Thank you.
Rebuttal, Mr. Cornilles.
I do support negotiation of prescription drugs. One of the things that is really encouraging to me about this issue is that we have local solutions right here that I think our nation needs to be looking at. But once again, we need an advocate in Congress that will be our voice. The example I'm referring to is, as was mentioned in my bio, the Virginia Garcia Community Health Centers. There are 6 clinics in Washington and Yamhill counties, as well as one that's being built right now in the city of Cornilles. I'm on the foundational board for Virginia Garcia. It's an organization that helps low-income or no-income individuals, residents of our counties, receive health care. Those who can't afford insurance. The average cost of an emergency room visit by those people, anyone who can't afford insurance, is $1,900 a visit in Oregon. But the average cost for a year of preventive care at one of our centers is $765. What a great way to lower costs. Bring the solutions back local, allow it to be a public-private partnership. These are solutions I've been a part of, and I was asked to join the board because they see I have the skill set to participate.
Thank you. Question number 3. Of every dollar spent, 40 cents is borrowed money. How do you balance bringing federal dollars into Oregon versus increasing the national debt load? Ms. Bonamici.
Yes, we absolutely have to attack the debt and the deficit, but we have to do it with the right priorities. And we have to look at where we're spending money now, where we shouldn't be spending money. Things like agriculture subsidies to big agriculture, things like tax breaks and tax loopholes. If we close those tax loopholes and those tax breaks, we'll have a system of taxation that is more fair. We'll have more dollars to put on the table to begin reducing the debt. My opponent talks about comprehensive tax reform as a jobs plan. I see that as trickle down. That's not going to help somebody who needs a job in Washington County tomorrow or is losing a home in Columbia County next week. We need long-term solutions, but we also need short-term solutions like getting more capital to small businesses, which is something I'll be working on from day one. You talked about, the question dealt with getting money to Oregon. We have many projects here that we need to have funded, and I will be a champion for those projects, just like I have been for the Columbia River Crossing, for the Newburgh-Dundee Bypass, for the port in Astoria, and the jetty work that needs to be done there. We need someone who understands those issues, who can go back to Congress and make a case for that funding, that infrastructure funding. There are many proposals on the table to help pay for infrastructure funding. That's a win-win situation. We need a champion for the district who will go back to Congress and make a case for those projects. Now, one of the last things that I did as a state legislator was to send a letter to the federal government with my Republican colleague from Newburgh, Sherwood area, and say, let's get this funding in support of the Newburgh-Dundee bypass. That's the kind of leadership we need in Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Cornilles.
We need more than just a letter. We need decisive action. We need leadership. Anyone can write a letter. That's not the role of one who wants to be a leader of our state. We need to go much further than this. Also, I would point out once again, if I'm elected, I'll be part of the majority party in Congress, not only for this year, probably for the next 3 years, maybe even longer than that. I think that's a very important consideration when you're trying to help the local economy, when you're trying to help this particular region. I think it all starts, though, with the question as to how we make sure that we receive our fair share here, but also don't contribute to the debt. Let's remember what the debt is. Right now, it's $15 trillion. $15 trillion is causing a stagnation of job growth. It's preventing more people from investing in this country. And it's lowering, it's downgrading our credit rating as a country. So this debt is a serious problem as it relates to job growth. And anyone who doesn't think that comprehensive tax overhaul right now would create immediate jobs has never created a job. Because I can tell you right now, if I knew what my tax rate and my tax bracket was a year from now, and you the same, I would have the certainty, the predictability that right now doesn't exist. And without that certainty and predictability, I'm not sure that I really want to take the risk in bringing on someone else, not to mention not knowing what health care is going to cost me and other benefits that we provide them. Certainty is what grows the jobs in the private sector. And we have a Congress that's unwilling to act. Now, I said earlier, one of the things we have to do is overhaul the tax system. Let me be more specific. A couple of things. First of all, you need to reduce significantly the corporate loopholes that exist today. General Electric, as an example, made $14.1 billion last year in profits, ladies and gentlemen, most of it overseas. And you know what? They didn't pay a single dollar in federal income tax. Why? Because loopholes are written by lawyers and lobbyists. And GE can afford their own lawyers and lobbyists to figure it out. But the small businesses contained in this theater, we don't have the resources to do that. Therefore, we get stuck with the bill. And that's why job growth in small businesses isn't occurring. That's unfair. The other thing we have to do is lower tax rates across the board. That means for you. That means for the person sitting next to you. That means people who have very low income. That means people with high income. You lower the rates across the board. You put more money in your pocket to save, to pay a mortgage, to pay for your kids' education, to invest, to put into the economy by buying products and services. That creates jobs. This is the type of certainty and decisive action I'm prepared to be a part of in Congress.
Thank you. Rebuttal, Ms. Bonamici.
Well, certainly any tax proposal needs to be assessed based on whether it's fair and whether there's two components. There's fairness and there's responsibility. The tax system, of course, needs to be fair. People have to pay their fair share, but I need to let you know that I will always be looking out for working class families, for small businesses, to make sure that they aren't stuck with a burden that they shouldn't be paying. But part of tax structure is responsibility as well, making sure that those who owe their taxes pay their taxes. We need to do a better job of that as well. And I will be a champion for this district. And I have to say that as someone who has spent time in the legislative process, for my opponent to suggest that he can get in there from day one and pass comprehensive tax reform, you know, it sounds good on the campaign trail, but it's simply not realistic. It's something that we need to work toward, but we have to have short-term solutions and long-term solutions to make sure that we're helping people from day one after this election. And I have the solutions to do that.
Thank you. Next question. Tell us how you intend to influence Congress to implement strategies that will help create jobs and reduce the unemployment rate in the U.S. generally and Oregon particularly. Mr. Cornilles.
What a great segue from the last question. You know, in this particular district, we haven't had an effective voice for years. Our last congressman, even as the Oregonian reported, had no clout in Congress. And we're suffering as a result. Now granted, most of you are probably gainfully employed. Most of you probably work for vibrant businesses. But there's a lot of people in our community that aren't. The fact is, Oregon continues to be above the national average in unemployment. 15 straight years, ladies and gentlemen. You have to ask yourself, how did we get to this point? Why are we at this point? What are we going to do to get out of this? We can continue to do more of the same, put the same type of people back into elected office, representing our state and our district. We also are at the top in poverty, the top in child hunger. We have, in some school districts, including Beaverton School District, we have 50% of the kids going to school this morning hungry. We have a terrible rate of foreclosure in this state. And of course, as it's been brought up in the last year or so, we're near the top in child trafficking. So ladies and gentlemen, these are records I'm not proud of. This is not the Oregon I grew up in. It's not the Oregon I want my kids to choose to live in. So we need an independent voice going back to Congress, not beholden to a particular party, not having to pay back because people help put them in Congress through their millions of dollars of contributions and negative ads, not someone who's answering to the elite. We need someone who's a newcomer, who's got the ideas, and who frankly doesn't need the job. Because their aspiration has never been to be in Congress. Their aspiration has been to grow a business, provide opportunity for people, and serve in their community. You can ask my wife, 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when I first suggested the idea of running for office, she who's known me for 30 years, 30 plus years, she said, where did that come from? I think you need to look at why each of us is running. Where did the impetus start? And then you'll know what our intentions are. And I've already spoken against my party when it's necessary. When I felt that it's improper to sign tax pledges or no new tax pledges written by lobbyists in Washington, D.C., I've said so. That's why I didn't sign it. When I've said that Paul Ryan was wrong to try to privatize Medicare, I said it. When I said we need to make sure that we don't politicize Planned Parenthood, I've said it. This is the type of boldness I've already expressed as a candidate. If you'll be kind enough to put me in office to represent you, why would I change an office? If I don't maintain that type of independence in a district that's largely not my party, how could I be expected to be reelected? I think I'm going back for the right reasons, and the people who would welcome me there know who I am and know what I can contribute immediately.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Thank you. Gosh, I hardly know where to start, because the question was about strategies to create jobs in the United States and Oregon. But I want to once again comment about, to those of you who didn't watch me during the primary, I ran a positive campaign the entire time. The day after the primary, my opponent started attacking me on day one with an attack that the Oregonian found to be false. I would much rather prefer talking about my ideas, my positions, what I will do for you in Congress. But as you saw this morning, he keeps constantly attacking, and people are ready for a change, let me tell you. So I want to talk about what I will do for jobs in Oregon and across the U.S. First, continue the work that I started in the legislature with Representative Doherty, getting capital to small businesses and entrepreneurs. I'm endorsed by the Northwest Credit Union Association. There's a bill right now that we can pass that will, no cost to taxpayers, free up capital for small businesses. Get people to work on infrastructure projects. Make sure that we're improving public education, that we have strong consumer protection laws that rebuild the economy, that we're connecting our community colleges with our local businesses to make sure that job training supports the economy. These are ideas that will help not only in Oregon, but across the country. More use of WorkShare, which is a program that Oregon uses. It's a win-win situation using existing unemployment dollars to help keep people on the job. Less cost to employers, and it keeps people in their job. And I'm running for office not to be somebody. I'm running to get things done, just like I did in the Oregon legislature. I don't need the job either. And the suggestion that I'm running because I need the job is just absurd. I'm running because I have worked together across the aisle in the Oregon legislature, proven that I can get things done across the aisle. I chaired the redistricting committee where everyone said you can't get that done. We defied the skeptics. That bill, both of those bills passed in both chambers with strong bipartisan support. And if I were as partisan as Rob is suggesting, I wouldn't have the endorsement of people like Republican former Attorney General Dave Frommeyer, or several district attorneys who are of course nonpartisan, but the district attorneys who are supporting me come from both parties. They know my record, they know that I can legislate, and they know that I can get things done. And I would rather focus on my ideas and what I'm doing, not responding to attacks from my opponent.
Thank you. Now rebuttal, Mr. Cornilles.
What a shock, attorneys endorsing attorneys. Ladies and gentlemen, 98% voting record in Salem is not healthy for this state and this district. We need bipartisan solutions, bipartisan approach. I'm very grateful that I have 21 mayors in this district who have endorsed me. That's about 70% of the mayors in the 1st Congressional District, and a handful of those don't share my party affiliation, Democrats, independents alike. Now, why would they support me, someone who admittedly has never been elected to public office? Because when it comes to this issue of bringing jobs back to Oregon from a federal standpoint, they've looked at the both of us, they looked at our record, they looked at our skill set, they look at our temperament, they look at the approach we're using, both in this campaign and in a bipartisan fashion, and they're saying, we believe Rob Cornilles will be the best partner for us. I'm proud of those endorsements. I think it says a lot about where we can go together on the federal and the local level.
Great, thank you. Now is the part of our debate where I have questions that have been submitted and selected from you out there in the audience, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond with no rebuttal. And the first question is, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is in the process of building a national wildlife refuge outside Sherwood and Wapato Lake. My question is, how do you see this effort on the part of the Refuge Service in terms of its economic value to the district? Oh, sorry. Want to know who goes? Ms. Bonamici.
Well, I appreciate the efforts of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to come to this area and create a place that will be beneficial to the district. I look forward to working with them to make sure that the project is funded appropriately, getting input from the community about how it can best serve the community, and making sure that it is there for the long run. So I appreciate the effort to revitalize this community and to bring a place here where we can all participate, and I'll work hard to make sure that it meets the needs of the community by listening to you and getting your input.
Great, Mr. Cornilles.
Well, one of the things I think we all share in common, we may disagree on some of the issues, but if you're an Oregonian, you're a natural conservationist. You're a natural environmentalist. For some of you, that's why you chose to live here or stay here. I certainly am very proud to say I'm from Oregon, to live in Oregon. My business, quite frankly, could be located anywhere in the country, and in some cases, or for some reasons, it should be, because of where the majority of our clients are. But my wife and I have always decided this is home, this is where we want to raise our kids because of the beauty of this area. It needs to be preserved. And any effort we can make to preserve it, to conserve it, and to showcase it, and so that our kids and grandkids can enjoy it, needs to be supported. As long as it doesn't create undue burden, such as we talked about with the previous question about regulatory burdens, that would make it more difficult for commerce and the economy to move forward. But we need to be very protective. I've spent a lot of nights in sleeping bags in Oregon. Never slept in a sleeping bag in Oregon, but spent a lot of nights. I want to make sure it's there for us.
Question number 6. Manufacturing is a very important contributor to the U.S. and the Oregon economy. If you are elected, do you have any specific ideas or initiatives that can support and grow manufacturing in the county, state, and congressional district?
There's traditional manufacturing, which we all grew up with and watched. There's high-tech manufacturing. Certainly the high-tech sector has been almost our savior in this particular district. You see what's happened in Hillsborough and in Beaverton with the advent of, with Intel moving there in 1976, setting up their first shop in Aloha. And I was happy to celebrate Aloha's centennial just on Sunday with them, with those people there. But we have to have someone who understands that business improves our communities. Business isn't evil. Business actually grows our tax base. Business gives us opportunity. Business then, therefore, supports our schools, our parks, our roadways. So we have to recognize what our strengths are, and that is historically in manufacturing. That's one of our strengths. And we have to have a tax policy and a fair, reasonable regulatory policy that encourages people to keep their jobs here. Nobody wants to ship jobs overseas. We want to ship products overseas.
Thank you, Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you. Yes, we absolutely need to not only grow the manufacturing that's here, but bring some of it back. I will be working with the community colleges to make sure that job training is meeting the needs of those in the community. We have some wonderful industry clusters in Washington County, and we have a great partner at the state with our at Business Oregon, our Economic Development Office. We also have wonderful organizations like Oregon Inc., ONAMI down in Eugene. We have a lot to be proud of here in Oregon. But with manufacturing, we need to have incentives that bring business here. I know Washington County has been a leader with that. Our Mayor Denny Doyle from Beaverton has been a leader with that. Let's keep bringing manufacturing here, have the incentives, but also have what businesses are looking for in quality communities and a good, strong system of public education. Businesses that locate here, whether they're manufacturing businesses or any businesses, want to make sure that their employees and their families live in good, strong, safe communities.
Thank you. Question 7. And I know it might be hard in a minute because of what they're asking. It says, can you outline 2 challenges you feel that are facing small business entrepreneurs and 2 ideas you plan to bring to Congress in answer to those challenges? Ms. Bonamici.
First is access to capital. It's dried up over the past several years, and there isn't enough opportunity for entrepreneurs and businesses to get access to capital so they can create and grow jobs here. Again, want to recognize Representative Doherty, who is my House co-sponsor and working at the state level on that issue. And I'll be working on two proposals, one with the Credit Union Association to get more capital, and we're also working with the Small Business Administration to make sure that they are offering every service available to give support to the businesses who want to start and grow here. And the other challenge, in addition to capital, is regulation. We need to make sure that the regulations that we have, whether they be financial regulations or tax burdens, are appropriately addressed to make sure that there's not a burden, but there's a fair tax system and a fair regulation system that is not unduly burdening small businesses.
Thank you. Mr. Cornilles.
I'd say the first thing is you want someone who understands what it's like to be a small business owner, who doesn't have to go through the learning curve, who doesn't have to ask you to come to them and tell them what's it like to grow a job, because they've already been there. Again, we need action. We need decisiveness. We don't need a tutoring system right now. And so that's the first thing. You have a friend in Congress if you'll elect me. Now, it doesn't mean that we won't hold you accountable. You've got to play by the rules like anybody else. But I understand what drives jobs. The second thing I would agree is capital. We just have a difference of opinion on how that's produced. I believe if you look at our community banks in this district, our community banks, according to some experts, could be out of business in the next 5 years, every one of them. That's a very, very disturbing thought. Why? Because of overregulation, through unintended consequences coming from the Dodd-Frank bill, which was designed to try to take care of the big guys, but the trickle-down now is affecting and hurting mostly the little guys, which affects you and I in our communities.
Thank you. And our final question for both of you is about job creation. Would you support a new stimulus program targeted only for infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, rail, public buildings? Mr. Cornilles.
I support the creation of more infrastructure projects. We have to do it responsibly, though. One of the sad facts is that in Portland, we have been studying now for over 6-7 years the Columbia River crossing north of us here, on the way to Vancouver, as you all know. This is a vital project. However, there's a lot of angst and disdain among the voters right now because it's been over $137 million of cost, and we haven't even thrown a shovel in the ground yet. And this is once again creating uncertainty. When's it going to get done? So I'm no apologist for wasting money.